Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I'll be honest, I think this is the biggest story in sports right now, okay? It is the wild, crazy situation going on with Lane Kiffin, okay? And if you've been following this channel, if you've been following anything college football related, you know that really it's gotten crazy. And a little bit of a backstory, I'm not going to do the big victory lap now, but I think we started talking about this on last Tuesday's show. If you were paying attention to Lane Kiffin's press conferences, the questions were becoming less and less about a historic season that Ole Miss is in the middle of, and more about his future. Last Tuesday, so this was or Monday press conference, they were openly asking him about the Florida job at his Monday press conference going into the game against Florida and what would essentially clinch a college football playoff spot. After the win against Florida, you basically clinched a spot in the college football playoff. The press conference, as we discussed on Sunday's show, became, hey, can you commit right now to being the Ole Miss head coach? And so I said, this is coming to a head, and I think it's coming much quicker than we anticipated because of what we learned on Monday afternoon. Okay, so this is why you need to be subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod. We don't generally do a lot of content on Mondays. We have the big Sunday show, and that kind of takes us into Tuesday morning. But I only bring it up because of the fact that, Monday, just this crazy story breaks. And it's wild because, if you go on social media and we're trying to figure out what's fact and what's fiction, but, early Monday, you start seeing reports of like Lane Kiffin's family is touring high schools in Gainesville. And you're like, oh, come on, man. Let's pump the brakes here, right? And so by Monday afternoon, it becomes official. Like, no, this is actually happening. We all saw the Pete Nakos report via On3, and it was Nakos, Brett McMurphy, Chris Lowe. Like, it was a team effort on this one. But what we found out pretty quickly was that Lane Kiffin's family, now Lane Kiffin, to his credit, I guess, was in Oxford on Monday, but his family was touring schools and touring things in Gainesville on Sunday. And on Monday, his family was in Baton Rouge. And so that was where we left it. That was the last update that we had. I think a couple things have happened since then. I mean, I think the first thing that happened is that we got the news about the ultimatum from Ole Miss. By the way, we have less today. You'll see there's less graphics, less video, stuff like that. We were dealing with the internet outage this morning, so that, we usually have more pop-ups, things like that. Nobody's fault. Sometimes the internet just goes out. So with Lane Kiffin, right, is that the big update since we did our live taping on Monday afternoon is that Ole Miss is ready to initiate an ultimatum. Best coach of this era, best season maybe in school history, and I believe they are very much ready to go ahead and actually give him an ultimatum. And if he is not ready to commit to them long-term, I think there is a possibility that the Egg Bowl is being coached by someone other than Lane Kiffin, and absolutely that a college football playoff game could be being coached by an interim as well. So that was the latest as of, I guess it would have been Monday night. But what I will say is I had a night to sleep on it. I also spent a good chunk of Monday texting with people in the know. I was texting with somebody that I would consider, kind of knows some stuff at Ole Miss. I'll leave it there. And the conclusions that I've come to are two. Is that one, this is very much a real story. I'll tell you what I think I found out behind the scenes. But that this is very much a real story. This is like I think there's this narrative that oh, this is all just Lane Kiffin playing games and he's being goofy and whatever, and he's gonna ride in on the white horse and sign the no. You don't send your wife and kids or ex-wife or whatever Layla Kiffin is now. You don't send them on a plane to other cities as a gimmick or a ploy. But what I do believe has also happened is this. I believe the ultimatum is very real, but I also believe that this all leaking out has very much sped up the process. And if there's any silver lining for this with Ole Miss fans, it is that I think you're actually going to get an answer sooner rather than later, okay? So as far as Monday is concerned, by the way, I think I actually know where this is going to end up. There may be a cryptic message that Lane Kiffin put out that we'll get to in a minute. So how did we get here, right? And so I think, to even backtrack to Monday, and I know we did a lot of this already, but I guess what I would say is a couple things. Is one, I don't believe this is all intentional, right? Like I've heard this theory of like, again, that this is Lane Kiffin playing games and Jimmy Sexton wanted it out there. I don't believe that's what happened at all. What I do believe has happened, what I do believe is real, is the fact that I do believe that Lane Kiffin is keeping his options open, right? Or I think the intention was to keep his options open as long as he can. No different than anyone with options. James Franklin, we talked about it on Sunday. Would he commit to Virginia Tech? He did, but he had options. You go on down the list. People that have options are going to keep them open as long as possible. But what I would also say is I do think where things got weird is that my understanding is that the Florida thing was pretty covert. Okay, so Lane Kiffin's family was in Gainesville on Sunday, and I don't think a lot of people knew that, and I think it was kept under the rug. And the reason that I believe it was kept under the rug is because Florida's been going after Lane Kiffin for well over a year now, right? Whatever you think of Scott Strickland, the Florida AD, not very good, has not been successful hiring football coaches. Frankly, should have hired a football coach, should have hired Lane Kiffin the last time instead of hiring Billy Napier. But they know how to run a search covertly, right? And so Layla Kiffin got in and out with her son of Gainesville on Sunday without anybody knowing. And I think it's because Florida knew all along this was going to be their number one candidate. They've been in communication. Remember, last year, Ryan McGee put out a report a few weeks ago. Ryan McGee from ESPN did that big Lane Kiffin documentary. And if you remember, he put out a report that Florida boosters were basically running around town last year at this time, early November, saying that Lane Kiffin was coming. It was a done deal, whatever. So Florida has been in communication with Kiffin and his camp for over a year now. Where I believe it got complicated and where I believe it got screwed up was actually the whole LSU component of it, okay? I think LSU is just flying by the seat of their pants. And to take it a step further, I think LSU is as big of a mess behind the scenes as it appears to be publicly. Okay, we all know what happened when Brian Kelly got fired, governor got involved, whatever. But remember what happened after that. They hire a school president a couple days later. They name the interim head coach, the interim AD, had kind of been the number 2 for years and years and years, and he'd been around the athletic department forever, okay? So he gets named the number 2. Then the school president comes out and says, well, I'm just getting to know him. He's not really the full-time AD. I know I just said he's the full-time AD, but he isn't. And so you basically have an AD that, yes, he has been involved in these coaching searches, but he hasn't really been involved the way that Scott Strickland has, the way that, frankly, the previous LSU AD, why am I blanking on his name? Scott Woodward was. And so basically my understanding is like the way this got out is that LSU is kind of an S show. LSU doesn't know what they're doing. And LSU, they got more leaks than the freaking Titanic, okay? And so that is how we got there. And I also believe that this is the situation that we find ourselves in because strictly of LSU. Florida was able to get the Kiffin family in and out of town. Nobody really knew. By Monday, everybody knew because LSU is a disaster, okay? But let's spin this forward because I do think there is a silver lining here. I think if LSU had not either gotten involved or been able to do this more covertly, I think Lane Kiffin really could have kicked the can down the road. By the way, I'll say this. I know there's all sorts of just rumors on how this leaked, who it leaked from. I think it actually leaked from the Ole Miss side. Now, people say, no, it's Jimmy Sexton. He's trying to create a scene. What does Jimmy Sexton benefit from all this? Lane Kiffin is going to be the highest paid coach anywhere in college football, wherever he's coaching next year. If it's Florida, LSU, Ole Miss, whatever. If he goes to the NFL, he's going to make 15 or 20 million a year. And so I just bring it up. It doesn't benefit Lane Kiffin for all of this to get out. All it does is cause chaos. And so I believe Ole Miss was the one who actually leaked this. And I solely bring it up because in my opinion, I think it actually all works out better for Ole Miss. If this doesn't get out, I think you can kick the can down the road. And I do think Lane Kiffin comes to his media availability next week. Remember, Ole Miss has a bye this week. Schedule worked out very nicely for Lane Kiffin, by the way. But if this doesn't come out, I think that Lane Kiffin can go to his press conference on Monday and sit there and say, hey, listen, man, nothing's changed since the last time I saw you after the Florida game. We're focused on going to the college football playoff. I love it here. It's disrespectful to the kids. We're trying to finish the season. And again, to reiterate, this has been the Kiffin stance. I want to wait until the end of the year. It's what I always do. Why I believe it came out of Ole Miss is I believe that they don't want to wait. They don't want to wait till the end of the Egg Bowl. They don't, let me put it this way. They don't want to beat their rival, hopefully, finish the best regular season of the modern era, get ready for a college football playoff. By the way, potentially an SEC championship game as well. Ole Miss would need some help, but they haven't been eliminated there. They don't want all of that going on while they don't know if their head coach is moving on. And so to me, this is actually a silver lining for Ole Miss that it got out. Because in my opinion, I think we're actually going to get a resolution pretty soon. Now, as people watch this, it is 11:17 Eastern time on Tuesday, November 18th. You may see this at 7 p.m. Eastern. You may see it at 1 a.m. going into Wednesday. You may see it on Wednesday afternoon. This stuff is always subject to change. I do think we are actually getting a resolution pretty soon. To me, I think if he's going to stay at Ole Miss, I think we know by Friday, probably Saturday, maybe Sunday at the latest. Because in my opinion, I think for all the chaos, all the this, all the that, Lane Kiffin even understands. Like Lane Kiffin, you can say whatever you want. I know he plays games and he's on Twitter all the time. We're going to show you some of his tweets in a minute. But whatever you think about Lane Kiffin, I do think he's smart enough to understand. By Monday, I have another press conference in the lead up to the Egg Bowl. If I don't have any sort of resolution, every single question at that press conference is going to be about my future, is going to be about Florida, is going to be about LSU, is going to be about my family going to Gainesville, going to Baton Rouge, whatever. And so I think he needs to make a decision now, and I think it's coming. And I think it favors Ole Miss. If this never got out and he could wait until after the Egg Bowl, and then, of course, remember, there's about a 2-week window between the end of the regular season and the start of the college football playoff. Maybe there's a world where he leaves campus for a few days. He has time to think about it. But the fact that this got out, I think he has to make a decision full speed ahead here over the next couple days. I think it's got to be before Monday. That's the first Egg Bowl, the first, week. I guess it would be week 14 media availability. And I think even he knows I can't go to the podium without a definitive answer. Now, if you don't get an answer, I don't know how quickly Ole Miss is ready to move off of him. But I do think if he's going to go into Egg Bowl week, like I'm not giving you an answer, I don't think there's a 0% possibility that Ole Miss is coaching with an interim in the Egg Bowl. So we'll see what happens from there. But I think this benefits Ole Miss. And if I had to handicap this right now, I actually do think he will return to Ole Miss. I think there's really 3 factors. I think all the talk in all these interviews he's done about truly being happy, I think it's true. I think 2, on top of it, I think the timing actually works out well for Ole Miss. I don't think he can wait weeks and months. And 3, it's got to come to an end. And so I think something happens. I think it happens soon. And I'll also say this. I know Kiffin is a master manipulator on social media. He's getting awfully emotional on his Twitter feed, though. I mean, he's getting a little emotional on his Twitter feed. He actually just posted something right before we went on air. As a matter of fact, Matt, before I get up the tweets that I sent you earlier in the morning, I do want to read you the most recent tweet that he put out, because goodness gracious, this man is an emotional guy, or at least he's certainly playing the part on social media. Let me see here if I can find the most recent tweet here. Have the best Tuesday, everybody. And it is from, it is a passage that says, how do you know what to do next? You ask yourself, honestly, what would your 90-year-old self advise you to do? What they would have you wished, what the 90-year-old would have wished you had done? You ask yourself, honestly, what you've sensed from the beginning, what you have ignored, what you have quieted and distracted from yourself. You make 2 lists, the positives and the negatives, and you weigh them. And if there's one thing on the left that overpowers the dozen things on the right, then you trust that. You ask yourself, what path will make you more of the person you're meant to be? Again, the passage, how do you know what to do next? You ask yourself honestly, what would your 90-year-old self advise you to do? Emo Lane Kiffin off the top rope. A couple other tweets. The first one, this was from yesterday, was the life-size Lane Kiffin. I guess it was a pseudo bobblehead doll around town. That's from Blue Sky in Oxford. By the way, not Blue Sky, the social media app that nobody uses. He also, I thought this was sort of important, multiple quote tweets of Walker Jones. For people who do not know Walker Jones, I actually met him at an event about 2 or 3 weeks ago, or a year or so ago. He is the leader of the Ole Miss collective. And he's kind of known as like the godfather. Like Ole Miss was the first one to really kind of figure out the collective thing. He's a former football player at Ole Miss. Matt, you can pop up that tweet whenever. But basically, Walker Jones put pictures of the stadium. Can't wait for the Egg Bowl. Let's pack that stadium. Lane Kiffin quote tweets him. But Walker Jones, I believe, is as much of a right-hand man in the athletic department as Lane Kiffin has. You could drop that tweet. And so for him to be quote tweeting Walker Jones, like if there's anybody at the Ole Miss athletic department that I believe he is in touch with, it's Walker Jones. Because, oh, by the way, if he stays and if you're going into the portal in a couple weeks, you need to have your money raised, your money funded, whatever. And so I think the fact that he's quote tweeting and pseudo communicating with him, I think is a totally positive sign. And then finally, I saw this one again, Emo Lane Kiffin popping in. Matt, you could pop up that last tweet. And I think he might have even said this in the Ross Dellinger interview, but Keith Carter, the AD at Ole Miss, tweeted out a picture of the stadium that said Utopia, talking about obviously Vaught Hemingway Stadium down in Oxford. Beautiful stadium, by the way. I've been before. And Lane Kiffin with the great tweet, he said, "We're currently in the good old days." And so to me, besides the fact that he's being crazy emo, I think he realizes, like I do think, again, all of the self-reflective stuff that felt made up, that felt contrived, that felt whatever, I think he is really a reflective person. He's thinking, I hate to say it, but, both of his parents passed away, and I think that's kind of changed his perspective on things. The fact that Lane Kiffin is tweeting, "We're currently in the good old days." One, I love that message. And two, I also do kind of believe that, you know what, maybe, just maybe this guy is going to stay. But to go back to what I said from the beginning, I actually think this is actually a best case scenario for Ole Miss because this got leaked. He's going to have to answer soon. I'm just going to guess. This part I don't know. I think we get a statement or a release on Friday. Head into the weekend, kind of overshadow the college football news cycle going into what's otherwise a quiet week. And then you can go into Egg Bowl week without any concerns, any questions. I would worry, though, if he does come out of this weekend without a contract extension. I think there's a possibility he doesn't coach the Egg Bowl. And I think there's a very likely reality that he is not the head coach at Ole Miss next year.